board and everybody for having me out here. It was a beautiful drive up from San Diego, California, where I reside. And it's been a full month for me, so it's just great to be back here in the company of all of you. I want to ask you a question. You know, Halloween's coming up. Does everybody got their candy? Everybody ready? Got their costumes? Kids got their costumes back there? Yeah? All right. I've been to a few Halloween parties too. And, you know, Halloween is a fun time, but it's also kind of a scary time, right? Because there's witches and ghosts and goblins all over the place. So today we're gonna talk a little bit about that, about this concept of good and evil. Because it's such a scary thing, you know, we've been brought up with this concept of evil and what it means. So the title of my talk is The Good, the Bad, and the Free. And what I want you to come away with, hopefully after our time together, is to free yourself of these constraints of good or bad, good or evil, light or darkness, and come away with a greater freedom and a way to free yourself and operate from neither. So again, we're dealing with paradoxes here: good, evil, good, bad, heaven, hell, and we've been force-fed these throughout probably our childhood. You know, if we've went to other churches, you know, we've got certain ideas of what these ideas mean. You know, we've got certain things that have been told to us, or, you know, we've believed over time. And in Unity, we come here and we see things through a little different lens. We call it a metaphysical lens. And so if you haven't had the exposure to that yet, we're going to get a little bit of that today. Have you heard the saying, "The devil made me do it"? Right? You ever see the cartoons or the TV shows where they got the little little angel on one side and the devil on the other, and it's like one's telling you, "Yeah, go ahead and eat that piece of candy," and the other's telling you, "No, it'll make you overweight, and it'll make you have bad health and everything." And then one of them, they get in this little fight, and one of them wins out. Well, this is a dilemma that we're always having. It always plays out in our consciousness. You know, that ego side, that materialistic side that wants us, you know, wants the instant gratification. I think in psychology they call it the id, right? ID, the id, and it's like the little 2-year-old inside you going, I want that, and I want it now. Give it to me. And then you have the super consciousness, you know, that God part of us, that Christ center that goes, no, wait a second, you know, this isn't what you're about. You can, you know, there's a greater reward, and there's a greater peace, and there's greater manifestations out there if you proceed this way. And then somewhere along the line we have that middle area, you know, that waking consciousness, or just that subconscious is kind of in the middle, you know, that ego part of ourselves. So what we're going to be discussing here is a couple unity principles. Is everybody aware of the 5 unity principles? Nod your head if so. If not, I'll run through them real quick. The closest thing we have to a theology in unity, and we don't have much, is our 5 principles. And the first principle is there's only one power, one presence active in the universe and in my life. God, the good, omnipotent. Now there's different wordings of these 5 principles, you'll see. They've been changed and amended over time, but basically the gist is the same. The second principle is that we're inherently parts of that God. We are the Christ in us. We have that essence of God inside of us, and therefore we're inherently good. We're born good. Third is that our thoughts not only create our reality, but create how we experience that reality. And I really want to anchor in today on that word experience, because we don't create necessarily the conditions. We don't always have control over what happens to us, but we do have control over what we perceive or how we interpret these conditions through our thoughts. The fourth principle is that prayer and meditation are essential to maintaining connection with this one source, this one power. And lastly, the fifth principle is that it's not enough to know these four principles and to study these four principles. We have to put these principles into practice in our own lives, in our lives with others, in each and every waking moment we're aware of them. So that's the five principles, and I really wanted to cover that just in case anybody, was not exposed to those before. And the two principles we're going to use today is the first principle: there's only one presence and one power active in the universe and as my life, God the good. And also that humans create their experience by the activity of their thinking. These two are going to be essential in this study today of good and evil. So what I'd like to do is start with Psalm 23:4. This comes from the newly revised standard unedited version. And it says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." So in this sense, we could look at a physical valley, right? You ever walk through a valley like at dusk, like at nighttime? I don't know if you've hiked out in the trails out here in a canyon or something like that. And it's dusk and you start hearing the coyotes howl and you start hearing the animals and you're like, am I going to step on a rattlesnake out here or something? And it could get a little spooky. I like hiking at that time. It's peaceful. People have kind of cleared out. But it can be a little creepy sometimes, especially when you're the only one out there on the trail. But what a lot of these verses do in the Bible is they not only, they could be applied to outside circumstances, but more importantly is taking these and looking at our inside circumstances. So in life, we have our highs and our lows, right? Well, these lows are these valleys we walk through. And again, I want to go through this. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, some versions say, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow. Or some even say, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And so the shadow, I want to cover this topic of the shadow. When we're walking through this valley, and you notice like a lot of times when you're walking through the valley, the sun may be shining somewhere else, but it casts this shadow over the valley. And what the shadow represents is that not so spiritual stuff inside of us. Those, they're kind of the antithesis of what our spiritual, ideas are, the spirits of love and peace and understanding and compassion. Well, the shadow is kind of those little icky parts of our psyche or of ourself. The shadow is jealousy. The shadow is impatience. The shadow is anger. These are all qualities that are still part of us. And our shadow is always part of us. We always have it with us. Everybody's always saying, oh, but I'm all about light. I'm all about light. No, we all have a shadow. Remember Peter Pan started crying when his shadow took off. So, and I look at it like we go through these periods in our life. Do you remember a period in your life where you've maybe went through a time where you were experiencing anger, you were fearful, you were anxious, it might have been a divorce, it might have been a job loss, it could have been a friendship that ended, but something that caused you to experience these emotions, and you're kind of in this valley of the shadow. So what we're going to learn is how to navigate through this valley, this shadow. And it's important to recognize that with the shadow part of ourselves, it has goodness in it. Because it shows us what needs to be healed. So that shadow aspect of ourselves is always longing to be healed. It's longing to be brought back in to balance, into oneness, into wholeness, into light. And so a lot of times when we're triggered by something, we feel the anger, we feel something, frustration, we start to feel that self-doubt, fear. It's calling for us to explore deeper within ourselves. What brought that on? Maybe those experiences, those traumas that we might have experienced that need healing, that need work. Maybe it's self-work. Maybe we can go through spiritual counseling, through a credential leader, or maybe we need therapy, some kind of a counseling. But the point is to not push it away or bury it in a box or say, you know what, Shadow, you just stay there or go over here. No, it's to bring it back into wholeness, bring it back into light. I look at the earth, like if you look at pictures of the earth, 365 days a year it spins around. And during part of that time, half of the earth is dark, right? And it's a lot like our lives. We go through these times where we experience light and everything's clear and we can see and we know who we are and where we are. But then there's times where we spin and part of our lives might go into this dark area. And we forget who we are. And in unity, that's basically how we define sin. Sin in unity isn't that you're a horrible person, you've created this, you committed this egregious act over God, and you're a horrible person, and you need to repent and all this. No, unity means simply, when we talk about sin, we just talk about you've forgotten who you are for a moment. And that in any moment, you have the power to remember. It just takes an awareness and go, you know what, wait a second. This isn't me. My true nature is a child of God. I'm a child of the light. And that's how I'm going to start acting. Boom. It's as simple as that. So I want to take the second part of this verse. It goes, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. So we've kind of covered what evil is. Evil is that consciousness of separation, of duality. We're separate. It's like the dark side of the earth or the dark side of the moon. When we turn our backs to the light, and we're looking, all we can see is our shadow. We're just operating out of that shadow. When we move towards the light, the shadow, it goes behind us. And so when we're looking at the light, our face lights up, right? I equate this, if you go outside today after service, just play around with your shadow. Go turn around and face the sun and see if you can see your shadow in front of you. And maybe turn to the side and your shadow's off here. And maybe turn to the back and your shadow, so when the light's hitting you from the back and you're turning away from the light, you're looking right at your shadow. So it goes on to say, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So again, when we go through these dark times, we've experienced this valley, and it's all of our shadow stuff, those fears, those doubts, those insecurities, those unhealed hurts, those life challenges we're facing. We have this rod and this staff. So a rod is if you're not familiar with shepherd speak, I had to look this stuff up. But a rod is a thing that the shepherds used to hold. It's like a stick or a club. And it was used for different things. It was used to club people or, that tried to steal or hurt the sheep, wild animals or whatever. It was also used to kind of poke or prod, to kind of administer discipline. And it was also, I just learned this recently, it was also used as a form of measurement. They would actually use a rod to count sheep, so they would know how many sheep were in their flock. So this rod in this instance, what we're looking at is divine law. The rod is divine law. It's the law of cause and effect. It's the law of abundance. It's these spiritual laws that are immutable. They're just there. I like to also equate it to, has anybody heard the term spiritual 2x4? It's when we go against what we know we should do, the right thing to do. We know it's inherently right in any situation, but when we don't do it, guess what? We don't follow that inner voice of spirit telling us go this way. Guess what? Whack. So that's how I equate the rod. It's also divine order. And a big part of that is non-resistance. And the staff represents our truth principles, right? Represents our 12 powers, the five unity principles I just highlighted. That's the staff. the staff is a longer, like a stick, like a walking stick, but it's got a crook on the end of it. And it's used to kind of, the shepherds can lean on it if they've had a long day shepherding, and it gives them rest and it gives them peace. But it's also a form of guidance. It represents our 12 spiritual powers, that when we enact, we get the guidance we need. We get the power we need. So it's gently that crook to pull us back in. It can fend off attackers. So again, the rod and the staff, they're there to comfort us. It shows us that God is always there with us, even in the darkest valley. We can pull on this one presence, this one power. So this idea, I want to go back to this idea of non-resistance. So we're going through the valley, but a lot of times we get wrapped up in these emotions. When we're going through the shadow and dealing with these qualities or whatever challenge we're facing, we're dealing with these emotions. So the first step in navigating this valley is awareness. Awareness that we're experiencing it. Hey, I'm feeling angry. My friends didn't invite me to this party and they're posting it all over Facebook and I'm not invited. I feel a little, And so it's just acknowledging, these emotions that are there. The second part of it is non-resistance. That's being an observer, not buying into that. I'm not going to own that emotion. I'm not going to own that anger. I'm not going to own that fear. I'm not going to own that frustration. Rather, I'm going to look at it. I'm just going to look at it, like hold it up and go, wow, that's interesting. How did you get here? Look at you. You got two parts to you. You got anger and you got fear or jealousy. Okay. Wonder what made that. I wonder how that got here. And if I got the time to do it then, great. But if not, maybe later in my contemplation, I can take a look at it. And again, take a look and figure out, there's methods like the Q process and stuff that can help us to ferret out sort of what's going on there, what needs to be healed. So again, looking at this from a point of an observer. And we can also, as we're moving through this valley, just walk through in faith. Have the faith that God is there, that one presence, that power is there. And we don't have to, again, it's there, the shadow is there to teach us, there to instruct us. Jesus Christ said, resist no evil. This is a quote from Martha Giudice. I think I said her name right. I hope I did. Jesus Christ said, resist no evil, for he knew in reality that there is no evil. Therefore, nothing to resist. Evil has come of man's vain imagination, or a belief in two powers, good and evil. There's an old legend that Adam and Eve ate of the Maya tree of illusion and saw two powers instead of one power, God. Therefore, evil is a false law man has made for himself through psychoma or soul sleep. Soul sleep means that man's soul has been hypnotized by the race. And in this case, race, they're not talking about color of skin or where you're from. It's talking about humankind in general. When we talk about race, you could say the collective humanity if you want. So hypnotized by the race belief of sin, sickness, and death, which is carnal or mortal thought, and their affairs have outpictured the illusions. So again, when we buy in, when we hear the news, when we hear of people talking, they're posting on Facebook, oh God, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick. And you just hear this, or in your own life, if you keep telling yourself, oh, I'm this, I'm that, this is the way it is, this is my reality, you're going to keep walking through that valley. So to get out of the valley, you have to change your thinking. You have to shift your thinking. I am a child of God. I'm experiencing this, but this has no power over me. My true nature is dot, 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 love. My true nature is peace. My true nature is intelligent, divine intelligence. Hopefully I didn't break this. My true nature is divine intelligence, dot, 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 dot. And as you say that to yourself, and if you repeat that to yourself, eventually you begin to create a new pattern of thought. And eventually you'll see that trail going out of the valley, and you'll get to that higher trail where you can see where you're going. You can get back into that light, and you can make it through the valley and look back where you've came from and say, you know what? I saw that, and it got me to this point, but now I'm ready to move on from a higher perspective. So in this concept of oneness, and again, I would like you to come away with not seeing things as good or evil, good or bad. You know, they're both there to be integrated. The light you experience can dispel the dark times or the darkness you feel. There's a psalm that really is a powerful psalm for me, and I want to share it with all of you. And it highlights this aspect of the oneness of God, and that no matter where you're at in your mind, in your heart, in your life, that one power, that one presence, that is always good, even though we can't see the good, it's always there for us to take hold of and to lean on, just like that staff, right? And it goes like this: where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, which is another word for hell, and that's a construct that we create in this valley, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle in the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. And the right hand is like that rod, that staff. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the night wraps itself around me, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day. For darkness is as light to you. There is only one power, one presence, active in the universe and in my life. God the good, omnipotent. Amen. Namaste.